Everybody to our Wednesday finance meeting where we talk about county's ongoing efforts to manage its revenues and its costs. One of the big topics in the PFM study was our continuing ownership and operation of the county nursing home. And there was a lot of information put out by PFM that has, I think, resulted in a lot of good discussion about the nursing home. Obviously, the context in which we operate our nursing home is that many counties, in fact, are divesting themselves of some offering nursing homes. The county made a conscious decision to retain ownership of the nursing home and put its money where its mouth was by floating the bond issue to pay for the rehab facility. However, there's a number of events recently have brought to light the fact that there's perhaps some subtle nuances that it would be good just to simply share with folks involved in this whole issue. One was, I think, that we all became acutely aware that the State Department of Health provides different reimbursement rates for county homes versus non-county homes, and that the non-county homes get a higher reimbursement rate. There's been a lot of controversy about that recently, and I just happened, a study on that. Secondly, is that a benefactor, who former resident at the nursing home, provided a generous endowment of over $200,000 to the nursing home. And in discussing options about what to do with that money, there was a consensus by the group, and that group was dominated by residents and staff at the facility, that some of that money should be put away for seed money and used potentially as a way to grow alternative funding sources for the nursing home. And of course, then there's the whole launch of our rehab facility. In general, I think the sort of ongoing debate about the nursing home, two options have been emphasized. One is the county retains ownership as a county department, operates as we currently do, but the county would sell to a third party. And in fact, there are a number of other options that sort of fall in between. And so we're here today to talk about the concept of or how the concept of a 501c3 could possibly relate to or provide options in terms of our relationship to our nursing home. To be crystal clear, the purpose of this is not to advocate any position. It is simply informational. The concept of utilizing a 501c3 option for the nursing homes has been used in many, many different contexts. And what this group, which is, I guess, been working on this for months now, not all the time, but that there was a lot of things that were not necessarily crystal clear at first glance. And again, the purpose here is simply to provide information on what's out there, not to advocate for any position. So 501c3 as an option for the nursing homes has been used for a lot of different possible goals. One is to increase revenues to the facility. Secondly is to help reduce costs. And thirdly is how might that perpetuate or lengthen the period of self-sufficiency that the nursing home could sustain with its current reserves, or how might it be a way for the county, if it so choose, to change ownership of the facility. So what we're going to talk about today, and it's going to be a real group presentation, everybody's got a piece, is what are the options, what are the pros and cons of each option, and what's the financial impact for each of the options, and what are the implications for governance.
So there's a couple topical areas that we'll hit on today. And there are two different items. One is a not-for-profit type entity that could be used to supplement fundraising, manage fundraising activities at the home. The other concept is a not-for-profit entity that would be created to manage, control the nursing home, two very separate things. But we use the name 501c3 interchangeably throughout the presentation, and a lot of times you hear it referred to that. So just to be clear what 501c3 means, 501c3 is the actual IRS section code that allows entities to be exempt from paying federal income tax on their operations. The exemption only covers federal income tax. It does not cover federal employment taxes and such. And there are some requirements for a 501c3 to be established. It's not, an entity can't just declare themselves, we're a not-for-profit entity. There are certain filings that need to be done with, I believe, the state. Articles of incorporation need to be prepared. But there's other requirements that, according to the IRS, you have to meet. And three of the big ones are none of the earnings can be inured to any private shareholder or individual. It may not be an action organization, and it may not participate in any campaign activity. In my prior life, when I was working for a CPA firm, I had some not-for-profits who actually earned revenues that were outside the scope of what they were set up to do for their not-for-profit purpose. In those cases, you end up paying income tax. So when you set up one of these items, again, you have to be real clear. The IRS lists several different categories of what does fall under the IRS approved charitable organizations, which what we're talking about today clearly does.
The three primary options that are going to be discussed today for a 501c entity are, first of all, an entity that is its own corporation, but its sole purpose would be for purposes of raising funds to fund the nursing home of the county. It has no employees in that respect. Its goal simply is to raise funds. There are a number of counties out there with nursing facilities that have separate 501c entities strictly for that purpose, as indicated in the slide. Friends of the nursing home will allow that type of fundraising for charitable purposes, and charitable purposes include health, nursing home facilities, and things like that. There'll be, like I said, no employees. The next, generally speaking, the next option would be to have a 501c3 that's controlled by the county, where the county, in the form typically of the Board of Commissioners, will be the board of the 501c3. It's its own separate entity, governed by its own board, which would be you. Employees are no longer county employees, but the facility remained a county home, and with that, all of the benefits and or baggage of having that in terms of debt and financial responsibility. The third option would be a transfer of assets, and again, none of these involve a sale of assets, but a transfer of assets to a 501c3 corporation that's controlled by a board where the Board of Commissioners do not have the control. It could be a blended board where you're a minority, or you could be not on the board whatsoever. But the point is, you don't have the control. It's no longer a county department. It no longer has county employees, and it operates on its own. And you're divorced from the financial obligations as a county would normally have if it were a county home. So those are the three primary options in big deal.
So if you can, given that we have 4,000 copies of this presentation, you might just want to keep this slide if you want more, say more time, keep your thing open to that, just as a reference, because we're going to be using options 1, 2, and 3 a lot, and it took us a long time before we got used to it. The menu or the options is, as Keith explained, option 1 is a standalone supporting the current county department. It's really agnostic when it comes to ownership. It has no impact on ownership, and it can be used to support any ownership model that we're possibly have. The second thing to keep in mind is that options 2 and 3 are mutually exclusive. You cannot do 2 and 3. Although you could do the first option, with the charitable giving mechanism. with either option 1 or option 3. Excuse me, option 2 or option 3. And it kind of begs the question, why not just sell it? Well, and this is what it was alluded to at the beginning. There are some intermediate steps which, depending on the circumstances, may or may not be particularly attractive. A 501c3 option 2 or and 3 permit the county to preserve the nursing home's mission to county residents while getting the county out from under some current obligations. We will explain what those obligations are. Selling to a third party divests the county from any direct or indirect control over the nursing home. It could be resold by the party that purchased it. It could go to a for-profit. It could even be closed down. But it becomes an asset in the third party's business plan totally out of our control. So again, going back to our original point, this is simply trying to broaden the debate of the area between maintaining it as a county department and selling it to a third party. Why would the county consider options 2 or 3? Employees are employed by the 501c3 and not by the county, which has certain impacts in terms of how we do business and then how much doing business costs us. If the employees are employed by the 501c3 and the business is run by the 501c3, you don't have to conform to county policies regarding human resources. Liz is going to get into this more later. But also bidding and purchasing, hard to reform those policies. We can carve out pension and insurance from the county, and the 501c3 could pursue its own benefit structure. It normally reduces the pension costs to the county because you're taking these people out and placing them into a separate entity. The benefit program can be different, potentially less costly than the county's benefits is currently offered, which could be beneficial to the facility itself in terms of maintaining its self-sufficiency for a long period of time. And finally, it does provide a 403b for retirement purposes for people in lieu of the county pension plan should be transferred to either the 501c3 options that we're talking about. Let's talk just for a minute about the charitable giving. Then I mentioned the fact that we have this endowment that actually gives us some real money to talk about in terms of launching this area. It can be done, as we said, without altering the current status of the CNRC that it's employed. Develops as a channel for private charitable contributions. They're taxed, even though the tax, any contributions seen in RC now as a county department are tax deductible. Some people just don't like giving the government money. It allows for broader community leadership and fundraising for the CNRC rather than to do it strictly through the county government. And it can be used with any ownership model.
On the second option, again, was a transfer to a separate 501c3 corporate entity. The idea is that you, as the commissioners, will be the board and only the board. And even though it's a separate organization, you retain entire control of the operation of the corporate entity that operates the nursing facility. I understand the reimbursement remains the same on the basis the rates for county-owned facilities. It remains county property, it will remain property of the 501c3 but controlled by you as its board, and it's run by a separate enterprise. You still have financial ties, which will be we'll get into more detail later in this presentation, but you are a separate entity. And one of the things that keep in mind, if that type of transition or transfer takes place, in the articles of incorporation, there's typically a provision that indicates that anything should happen to that entity that you create, all of the property that's transferred will come back to the county itself. So that's sort of a fail-safe that's fairly typical of all articles of incorporation that are set up under this type of option.
When you look at what designates designates a nursing facility in the state of Pennsylvania. It's PA Code 1189 that defines what is a county nursing home, and specifically talks about whether it's a new facility or an existing facility. That designation as a county facility is because it is controlled by a county institution, district, or by the county government. Control means that they have the power to direct or cause to direct the management and policies of the nursing facilities, whether through either equitable ownership of voting securities or otherwise. Basically, it is the county who is ultimately responsible. The thing to remember is, though, from a state licensure perspective or from a federal certification perspective, there are no differentiations in whether it's a county facility or a non-county facility or a private facility, profit or nonprofit. It is really just relating to Medicaid reimbursement alone, and that's that PA Code 1189 really refers to it. As a county facility, your reimbursement is different than what it is for non-county facilities, whether those non-county facilities happen to be for-profit or non-for-profit facilities. However, should the election be to move to a 501c3, regardless of whether it is option 2 or option 3, it is still considered a change of ownership for the federal government, for CMS. And therefore, there's some new paperwork to be done, but there's no change in the provider status, there's no change in reimbursement at the federal level for Medicare, and depending on the option would be whether there'd be a change in reimbursement for the Medicaid population from a state perspective.
The option 3 option, obviously, it's no longer a county home anymore. The board cannot have a majority, you cannot have a majority on the new board of the 501c3. Although you can sit on that board, it would be my advice to be separately, I guess, divorced from that organization entirely, just for purposes of keeping it, I think, safer from a liability standpoint. And this would all be indicated in the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws, where it will be operated separately. You have no financial control or responsibility, and that status, as indicated, is no longer a county home, but it still remains a nonprofit entity under the 501c3 status.
So in option 3, the reimbursement does change. It would be reimbursed the same as all non-county facilities, both for-profit and not-for-profit. It is based on changes in reimbursement on a quarterly basis. That is based upon the acuity of the residents that are being served. There is a system in place where the case mix index is identified for each of the facilities, and their actual rates are adjusted quarterly based upon that. All the county add-ons that are currently in place as a county facilities are forfeited, they go away. And when you look at what the potential changes in reimbursement, as Larry indicated, there was a study done by PACA to look at the impact of county homes, and it is projected in there that at a minimum you could receive an additional $462,577 if the facility was running under the non-county reimbursement system versus the county reimbursement system as it is right now. Next is there are 2 facilities that Premier currently manages that are 501c3s. And the first one is Pleasant Valley Manor. It is owned by Monroe County. It's 174 beds. It is organized as option 2, where in as far as the board is made up of the commissioners as well as some other county representatives. I mean, it's non-county or community representatives, but it is representative of option number 2. It has its own separate pension plan for the employees. They have a choice there for their insurance plans, whether they're self-insured or fully insured. Purchasing is separate from the county. They have their own independent union negotiations, separate wages and benefits packages, HR support or human relations support, personnel support is at the local facility. So there's a staff member who's designated to do that. They went from from a financial perspective, from incurring losses to breaking even. Because of being able to negotiate with the unions and to manage the cost of the facilities. The board is made up of the 3 commissioners and 2 community members. However, the board is still, the county board commissioners are still the majority. That is why it is still organized as option 2, not option 3. The one thing that they can do is that because it is considered a nonprofit, they are eligible for grant programs that are available to nonprofit organizations. So they have written for grants that have provided revenue or dollars into the facilities to do specific programming. So it is still backed by the county. Financially, the county is still responsible. That's case study number 1. Number 2 is Susqueview, which is Clinton County facility. It also is organized as an option 2. The board is comprised of the 3 commissioners. They have their own separate pension plan. Again, they have the choice of their own insurance. They bid for their own insurance and provide that. Their purchasing is separate from the county. They have independent union negotiations, separate wages and benefits, which, as you see, are somewhere between 20-30% less than what it would be if they had been still county employees. And personnel or HR function is at the local level. This facility is made up of 146 beds, and there are 4 independent living apartments that were developed at that facility as well. Their financial operations is profitable, and it's about $100,000 to $200,000 per year. They have approximately $3 million in cash at the bank for that entity. And as I mentioned, the board is composed of just the 3 commissioners. Therefore, it is still designated as a county facility and falls under that reimbursement system as well. And there's self-insured.
Okay, we're going to take a look at some of the pros and cons of the options 2 and 3. Where there are common pros or common cons, we'll deal with them together, and then we'll break it out individually into each of the different options.
Okay, so as Joanne mentioned, some of the pros of looking at these options are employees at the nursing home would no longer fall under the county benefit program, which would be a savings and would reduce benefit costs, particularly if the pension option is also removed. That's where your significant cost savings comes from. It also takes away the burden of worrying about our part-time workers qualifying for pension or benefits if they work more than 1,000 hours. We are currently tied to that right now, and it makes things a little difficult. And as Joanne mentioned, the nursing home would be able to purchase all their support services, probably at a lower cost for outside entities.
So when you look at the cons of the structures set up that way, under option 2, as has been mentioned, since the commissioners retain control of the board, the county is still responsible for the financial operations of the entity. As with any not-for-profit, you have the annual requirement to file a 990 tax return, which the county currently doesn't have to do. The reduction of pool for the self-funded programs, your insurances, your benefit costs, may actually result in higher county costs in some instances. In addition, as I had said previously, there are specific requirements that have to be met to maintain your status as a 501c3. Of course, changing benefits could meet with union resistance. The county cannot allocate county costs to the nursing home anymore through the indirect plan. And the CNRC must purchase services, central services, or bring them in-house, as opposed to using the county central services now. And we'll expand on these a little bit more as we go deeper into this. Under option 3, again, the same requirement for the annual 990 IRS return. The same potential reduction of pool and self-funded program could actually result in higher county costs in some instances. In option 3, because there is a total separation from the county and the entity, there is the potential for separation, due to separation from disrupting alignment with goals or initiatives of the county. Again, still in option 3, specific requirements need to be met to maintain your current status as a nonprofit organization. Changing benefits could be met with union resistance. Again, the county cannot allocate central costs to the nursing home, and therefore they would have to either purchase those services or bring them in-house.
When you look at the impact on revenues, as we said earlier, under option 2, it's a county-controlled nonprofit organization. There's no change to the reimbursement rates under Medicaid. There's no change to the reimbursement rates under Medicare. Option number 3, because it's a nonprofit no longer affiliated with the county, then there is the estimated increase in the revenue because of the change in the reimbursement system for Medicaid to the case mix, CMI, quarterly change to those rates. There would be no change to the Medicare reimbursement because again, that's a federal program that's not based upon your designation.
Over the next few slides, we'll be talking about the expenses and debt management of the county. In most of the instances, both option 2 and option 3 are the same. When they're not the same, we'll point it out.
Okay, so like we just discussed, in options 2 and 3, the benefits are no longer part of the county's costs. That includes the health care, the retirement, the workers' comp, and the unemployment compensation benefits. When looking at the health benefits, both types would no longer be offered to the county's plan. The impact on the rest of the county, what happens if we would carve out the nursing home? How does that impact our rates as a county as a whole? The county would still remain in the large group category. Removing those employees would not reduce that amount. The claims from the nursing home on average are about the same as the county. So that's pretty significant there. And we don't have any data to support an increase or a decrease. Since our large group plan would have changed, there's nothing to show whether it would increase or decrease our premium rates.
So when you look at the impact on the retirement fund, this is very similar to what we just went through with transportation. Any change from the county to any other type of entity would result in the end of those employees participating in the retirement plan, contributing to the retirement plan. The impact to the county is those employees would no longer be part of the annual required contribution that's calculated every year to fund the plan. In short term, an analysis would need to be done to calculate what the impact would be on all those folks who would be leaving at that point out of the plan. I'll talk about that in a couple more slides down. And longer term, they no longer would impact our defined benefit plan. Under options 2 and 3, as for the 501c3 itself, they would have a separate retirement plan for the county, which of course would then enable them to control and set the rates into the employee-owned defined contribution plan. And for them, it would be much more of a predictable annual expense. So in terms of what would happen with any employees in an instance like this, you have to break them out into the various categories. Anyone who has under 5 years of service and is under 60 years of age would get a lump sum return of their contributions and the interest earned in them. There would be no county contribution. Anyone between 5 and 8 years of service and under age 60 would be eligible for a lump sum distribution of their accumulated contributions and the interest they earned. But they would also, if they chose, instead of doing that, they could invest their contributions up to age 60 and then begin to draw pension, including whatever would have been earned, county portion. Now, for those folks who fall into the eligible criteria at the moment that it would happen, you would have your normal retirement option, which would be anyone, which is anyone who is age 60, age 55, with 20 years of service. They would be eligible for the normal county retirement. Anybody who has 20 years of service but is not age 55 would be eligible for a voluntary retirement. and that is essentially but at a reduced rate than a normal retirement would be. And then for anyone who had 8 years of service up to 20 and is under age 60, they would be eligible for an involuntary retirement, which is still a monthly retirement, including county piece, but it's the lowest of the options in the pension calculation. So, one of the questions you always think about when you're looking at the retirement fund is when you have a large group of employees who would be leaving the plan, what type of impact would that have? And intuitively, you would think, okay, I got a large group of people leaving, my arc is going to go down, and that's where it ends. And typically, speaking with Hay Group on this, when they have situations like this, the few that they've experienced, typically that is what happens. The arc goes down, the county's liability goes down. But there are one or two unique instances where in the short term, a year or year after this happens, you actually can end up with a higher arc. And what drives that is if the population of people who are included in that group that is leaving are at a more mature age-wise level than the norm. Because the assumption is that everyone is spreading their retirement over their actuarially projected employment life. And when you have a bunch of people who are towards the end who are leaving, you now are accelerating what was now over a period of time. So in unique instances, yes, you can end up with situations where the arc may get higher. That is going to be driven by your, I call it retirement age maturity. Now, if I look, I pulled together a slide back in March of what our breakdown is for the 289 people that are in the nursing home and the retirement fund currently. About the 52 people relate to 18% of the nursing home folks. The 72 that are 8 to 20 are about 25%. The big one is the 118 that are less than 5 years, which is about what I would expect. Almost half the population. In my guesstimation, I don't think this would be significant enough to push us into what would be one of those red zones that you have a mature population that would accelerate some type of funding. Typically, in this scenario, you would experience a reduction in ARC. However, as with this entire process, if this was something that would be explored further, there are lots of other folks that you need to pull in the room and talk to. Hay Group would be able to provide us with this information if we decided we wanted to take a look at that. They would be able to do the exact study on that. But for a ballpark estimation, that's what we need now.
For workers' comp and unemployment compensation, the nursing home is probably our biggest draw of claims, but not necessarily the biggest payment towards those claims. We are self-insured for workers' comp, and unemployment comp is driven highly by the amount of unemployment compensation claims. If you go to the next slide, I think I can sum it up. I'll just talk to everything in this slide. The actual salaries are about 22% of the total county salaries. The workers' comp claims are about 80%, and unemployment is about 48%. They're paying in about 35% of the workers' comp expense and 30% of the unemployment comp. So if we would separate, it would have a very positive effect on the county and probably a negative effect on the nursing home because of their claims. The impact on the indirect costs, the county will no longer have the nursing home as a revenue source for indirect costs. The fixed costs will be shared over a smaller base of the remaining county departments, but the variable costs may be eliminated, and actually the fixed costs over time would go down. The impact to the nursing home, they would have to provide all of their internal services, their internal service functions by either hiring or contracting for those services. And that's purchasing, ID, payroll, accounts payable, HR, legal. debt and cash management. This is where the options differ somewhat. When looking at debt, the things that are the same is both entities would not automatically be backed by the county's full faith and credit, by the taxing authority. The county could choose in both instances to back the debt via a lease rental debt. However, on option 2, the 501c3 would impact the county's bond rating and our financials, and ultimately, we would be responsible for any shortfalls that the nursing home would have. Under option 3, they are completely independent of the county, and they would only impact us if we choose. Under cash management, both options would be responsible for their cash flow resources. Option 2 may have an easier access to supplemental county loans. And under both options, they would not fall under county code for investment purposes, so the potential to earn a higher rate of return is there.
So Dana, I'm sorry, the county code in terms of investment is pretty conservative. This will get them out from under it, they could possibly get more, higher rate of return. It also could lose their insurance if they chose to call a higher risk.
Correct, but they could go to an FDIC-backed CD and earn more than we can.
So next up is potential labor issues, since the positions covered by, majority of the positions are covered by ASME. With option 2, currently in our contract, we do not have a specific article that addresses subcontracting work. Okay, so there's nothing currently in the labor agreement that addresses that. So per the Pennsylvania Labor Relations Board, we would need to bargain its way out of the current contract, meaning we would need to offer some sort of a severance to get out of that, because they would no longer be affiliated with AFSCME. The scenario the closest thing I could find that we've done in the past was what we did at the prison a couple years ago. We ended up negotiating 2 weeks of pay per years of service. So they got paid out a minimum of 8 weeks, a maximum of 13 weeks. If we applied that concept to the snapshot today, it would probably cost us an additional $1.5 million to get out of that contract. Option 3, there would be no requirement to bargain out of the contract, since essentially the county's getting out of the business. So it may potentially devalue the property, since they would have to assume the bargaining, they'd have to assume AFSCME's as a representative agent of the employees. The plan is this everywhere for the upcoming union contract is we are going to try to get an article addressed in there for subcontracting work. I mean, it is beneficial for AFSCME and for us to have an article in there that addresses the steps we would take if we were looking to contract out work. So that will help us by not having to offer a severance package, and it will help AFSCME have terms there of what we can and cannot do.
As far as future issues, one of the things just wanted to put on the table is the fact that there are some projected changes or implied changes to the Medicaid reimbursement system moving forward. When we talked about the projected increase in revenue under option 3, that's under the current case mix system that's in place. As you may or may not be aware, there's been a position paper put out under the state government to change Medicaid into managed long-term care services and support, basically taking the whole Medicaid population and moving them into a managed care environment. While some of that has already been done in the community, as other states have done this, it has also included the nursing home population. As of right now, there's just the start of involvement with stakeholders and looking at how it would be structured. But we still wanted to put it on the table that there could be down the road changes into the Medicaid system that could affect the reimbursement as well, both if you remain as you are or if there's any change as indicated under option 2 or option 3. The projected timeline for the rollout for the changes to a managed environment for Medicaid is projected to start in January of 2017. Currently, under the discussion document that's out there, they're talking about doing it in a geographical kind of a rollout that will take over a period of time. But we really don't know what the actual structure or what the proposal and how to organize it. But if it follows some of the previous states that are implementing it over the course of the last couple of years, they basically capitate the cost of the Medicaid services to outside insurance companies who then are responsible to manage the care, whether that be based in the community or whether it's based in the nursing facility. New Jersey right now is going through that implementation. They started last July. New York is doing the same thing. They're grandfathering in New Jersey. New York is doing things a little bit different. There have been others that they just 100% moved over into the managed environment. In that case, then the contracts or the reimbursement is no longer between the state and the facilities. It's between the facilities and the independent insurance companies that hold the contracts with the state to provide that level of care. So again, there's no way to, even at this point, it's so early in Pennsylvania, to even project what the potential financial ramifications will be, but we wanted to at least make you aware and put it on the table that that is what is being projected under the current administration, is to make that change.
So, quick highlight summary, before we open it up for discussion. We looked at the three 501c3 options that could possibly pertain to the nursing home. The first option is the charitable giving channel to support CNRC, either as it exists now as a county department, possibly under other ownership arrangements. Again, as ownership model agnostic. Option two is the ownership transfer to a new entity, but the county through retains control because the current board of commissioners would control the board of the new entity, and along with that, then comes that the county would retain fiscal responsibility for the operation of the facility. And finally, option three, where there's an ownership transfer to the new 501c3, where the county divests its control. To Keith's recommendation is not even to stay on the board as a minority group, but to be off the board completely. But in doing so, we also divest ourselves of fiscal responsibility. Now, the advantages to the county and or the facility, there are lower benefits costs, and based on Bob's analysis, if we were to do one of the options 2 or 3, the county would probably save. And the facility itself, to the extent that it was self-sufficient, could also enjoy the same benefit if they chose a lesser cost. Although it seemed pretty clear that unemployment compensation and workers' comp, that they would probably not save money, but they would probably pay more than we do for them now. And of course, in option 3, there's higher state reimbursement rates that would lead to an increase in revenue given the size of business, again, for option 3 only. There's some disadvantages to both the county and the facility that mostly center around decrease in risk pools, but as Bob has explained, in the area of retirement and pension, the county probably would come out okay in that. But however, the county would lose the benefit currently have, where there's indirect costs from the facility that go back to the county. However, if the facility, quasi or fully independent, could find a cheaper way of providing those services, the facility itself would benefit as compared to what it's currently paying now for indirect. And of course, the big question is change in ownership, particularly option 3, is there a possible dissipation of the mission of CNRC as a county facility, serving the county's residents. And I think as Liz has pretty effectively outlined, there are a range of labor issues that we have to negotiate with other plans at AFSCME. So what is our conclusion? Again, our conclusion here is that the county wants to get out of the skilled nursing facility business altogether. Outright sale probably makes the most sense. However, if the county seeks to retain control or influence through options 2 or 3 respectively, that under these 501c3 arrangements, there could be reductions in costs for operations that would be worth considering for both the county and for the independent or quasi-independent facility itself. With a strong management team in place, the CNRC has potential to reduce its costs and increase revenues from basically operate as an independent or quasi-independent enterprise. If the CNRC as a county department begins to require general fund subsidies, which we've discussed at length, this provides flexibility to increase revenues, cut costs, and correct the financial situation without selling, kind of like a short stop, and allowing the CNRC to retain to a greater or lesser degree than option 2 or 3 its commitment to the community, the seniors and their families. The one thing, and again, we've said very clearly that there are no policy recommendations here, but the one thing that comes closest to it, or seems to be closest to no-brainer, is the charitable, setting up a charitable organization to help supplement the funding streams coming into the CNRC, and that, in fact, what's taking place with this endowment that we already have, maybe a sort of starting shot to make us think about doing that to promote other sources of giving that we currently don't. If everybody remembers, with the endowment funds, they're going to build an area outside, I think it's a ceiling, that the residents and the families said would be very, very nice, and people a place to go outside. And those are the kinds of benefits that could accrue to the facility that might not be possible simply either through its own revenue or if the facility was requiring a subsidy from the general fund, have those kinds of amenities. So, I think again, the ownership agnostic 501c3 as a charitable giving channel is something I think probably is worthy of consideration.
Let me first thank all of you. What started out as a conversation I had many, many years ago with a couple of commissioners who have 501c3s brought back and have sort of been percolating and brewing up. So I was nowhere prepared for option 2 or 3. I had no idea that that was, sort of out there to morph into something else. I was looking at strictly the sort of friends of fill in the blank. We see them in the community all the time. So why could that not be in place there so that when that second van is needed, perhaps the friends could purchase the van rather than the operating dollars down there for something else. So this far exceeded, and certainly I appreciate the depth that you went into for these additional options. One question that I have is if you do sort of what I would say, the maybe silver, level of the first 501c3, can it then morph into sort of that gold or bronze level later on? Or do you have to restart the whole thing over?
You'd want to restart.
Okay, so you would restart,
Yeah.
you would leave your 501c3 as Friends of Claremont.
Exactly.
And the gracious gift given of almost $250,000 would then, as others we hope, find a way to that. Okay.
Yes.
Then the full structural change, if that would be decided upon, would go under option 2 or 3. Okay. I mean, that certainly well answers what I had, sort of asked for, as where would the community be able to give dollars to that facility?
Right.
With, sort of not that, as you mentioned, hey, we're giving it to the government. No, you're giving it to 501c3 for the residents as, their needs come up.
And I think people thought, as you thought about it, everyone thought about it, but, you know, how realistic it was, but when somebody actually gives you, or, gives you a contribution that you
And that's
receive.
not the first that we have received, and we receive money through others, either in the form of, you know, personal donations or whatever to the county. But in this particular case, in the nursing home, to then offset some of the needs that would otherwise come before the commissioners for an expense, and perhaps a nice-to-have expense, a second van, a garden area, something like that, through the guidelines of the 501c3 could be funded.
And Dana, maybe you could give us, Dana and Keith, we do have the existing, the gift shop through the auxiliary, and maybe you could sort of give us a status on that.
A little bit of history. At one point in time, we had an auxiliary that ran the gift shop, had volunteers that actually bought the stuff. It currently is set up so that our county employees are running the gift shop, and the county is purchasing all of the food and the items that are sold through the gift shop. We are giving a $20,000, I think is what the annual amount is, to the auxiliary. And they're also taking in small donations, it's mostly county employees. And then they buy certain different types of capital and improvements to the facility annually. So it's basically, that's what is existing now. Did you want to add any?
Well, I looked into it and talked to some of the folks that were part of the auxiliary. And from my standpoint, as an attorney, in terms of a legal organization, it's sort of lacking in involvement and even some officers. And at one point, when there was a membership organization, where people would donate or pay a membership fee of a minimal amount, where there are, I think, hundreds of people, it's down to a small number now. So it's functioning as an organization. It exists, but it's not as robust as it used to be.
We had a concern, again, if this was a vibrant organization, we didn't want to step on anybody's toes by going, you know, around, or if we were going to set up the 501c3 to in fact possibly collaborate with them in some shape, manner, or form to do so. But based on Keith's investigation and just looking at the numbers, they're not really a factor, and we couldn't really build a charitable giving strategy on that.
Several months ago, you had copied us on something you received, I think it was from Commissioner Cross. It was some type of a publication on a third party, an outside charitable organization who dedicates themselves to fundraising type.
It's the Foundation for Enhancing Communities out of Harrisburg.
And they keep some type of a fee structure
Right.
based on what they
Right.
do. I mean, those options are out there also. You know, I think if something along that nature, if we ever consider that, I mean, obviously for the performance standards, we have to have them agree to before the type of payment. But there are organizations that assist in other ways too.
And simply creating a 501c3 doesn't all of a sudden give us a flood of contributions. It's just like marketing the facility. If you want to raise money, you have to do development, you have to do a lot of work. I think passively, you know, it would be great for it to be there. In the case when we have contributions that sort of come to us based on the service that's provided by the facility, for it to realize full potential, obviously you would have to, you know, make a giving plan and development plan. And work that. But one of the really cool things is that what we found through either the gentleman who runs the pharmacies that we're closely with. Yeah, I mean, there are a number of people in the community who don't work for the county government who feel very passionate about the facility, about the nursing home, and who conceivably could be, would be willing to contribute their time and effort to be on the board. And as we all know, a real good board of any kind of organization, one of its primary functions is to raise funds. You bring in, you bring in respected people in the community with passion, with the right kind of skills, with the right kind of connections. It's not like we have to hire a whole staff out there and do it. But there does exist that potential to broaden the field beyond simply either the employees of county or the elected officials.
I think the foundation I talked about too, they'll manage individual foundations if you wish to set one up. They will manage Borough Mechanicsburg Foundation. They'll manage a foundation of giving for, as you said, a fee for them. But they've been pretty successful in the community doing that for a while.
Joanne, so in the two case studies, is it safe to say that the two facilities in question that went either the option 2 or the option 3 route were facilities that were in pretty dire financial straits, or they were certainly operating at a loss, and they went into that as a way to improve their financial position?
They, again, in both cases, it's an option 2. Just to be clarified on that, they're both option 2s because even in Monroe County, the facility, Pleasant Valley Manor, the majority of the board members, or the commissioners hold the majority. So there's 2 others, there's 3 and 2, so it's not really set up as option 3. Both of them did it a while ago, and again, it was for reimbursement reasons. So, but I wasn't quite here with the company or with the organization at the time as to say where they were at that point in time. But truly being able to operate it more effectively and more efficiently was a part of the decision making from what I heard when I started with the original company 25 years ago. So neither one of those were recent changes. They've been 501c3s for a while. Option 3, the only example that I know about is the one that happened not that long ago with Center County's facility, which went to option 3. And in that case, it was because of deficits that the county was incurring, and they moved to the option 3. We weren't involved with that, so I can only speak to what I know from talking to people, not because of current.
That's a case study how you don't want to do one of these.
Exactly. Kind of like Erie on economic development, but we won't do that.
As I said, I don't know firsthand, I can tell you what I heard, but certainly it's there. But certainly over the case of the years that I've been involved with both facilities, which is now about 25 years, it hasn't been better for them from a financial perspective.
Joanne, let me ask you something, because the PACA study has not received any publicity whatsoever.
No.
And I'm surprised about that because it is a significant story as far as, because the fact is, according to that study, 5 recent county-owned homes that were turned over to private enterprise, now costing the state an additional $7 million annually. And in fact, according to the PACA study, that, if all of the remaining county-owned homes were to privatize, that it would cost the state an additional $29.9 million. In addition to that, there's a like amount in reimbursement from the federal government for nursing home assessment that Pennsylvania may not also receive.
Correct.
Now, I know, without getting into details, that there's negotiations underway with respect to the current state budget that hopefully may benefit, some county-owned homes and kind of like level the playing field. So your suggestion in here that we would gain, $500,000 because we would be treated the same as what's going on currently, may change.
You could, and
The fact of the matter is the state, they're going to look to ways to hold down costs or cut costs. So I think, those are concerns that I would have with respect to moving forward on this. In fact, that's not the recommendation that you're making here. The other thing I want to point out, I think it deserves to be emphasized, is that we have $3 million in the bank, okay? And not one dime of property taxpayer funds from the people of Cumberland County is going to support our nursing home at present. The other thing I think that we need to point out is that a couple of years ago, when the last contract was negotiated with AFSCME, there were $1 million worth of concessions that the employees of AFSCME agreed to. Right? And we know we need to make this work, but I am certainly not prepared to move forward with any option to divest or turn this over to ownership away from the county at this point. We know we need to continue to work. I mean, one of the reasons we moved forward with the rehab center and made that decision was so that we could, improve the bottom line, give Claremont a fighting chance to survive, its current situation. So I don't want, as a result of this, to go out of the room that we're considering these options, because at this point in time, I know a lot of work went into this, but the fact of the matter is I'm not interested in moving forward with anything except maybe the last one.
Strictly information.
Well, this is far from the full range of options anyhow. This is not the strategic review that's been discussed in the past of all the options you would have in terms of solving the county's problems if it happened with regards to Claremont. And candidly, it should be said too, the packet study is certainly tinged with some degree of self-interest as well. It's certainly not.
It's factually, it was done by an independent accounting firm, so, I think it's important.
I would accept every study that's.
Public should be aware of that. Certainly our legislators should be aware of it, because they're the ones that are paying, going to have to figure out how to balance the budget with an additional $29 million if all of a sudden all the county homes were privatized.
If indeed that's true, I just don't know that we've had a rigorous discussion on exactly what that is. But I would also point out that it's frankly not true to say that this county doesn't put any. This board of commissioners alone this year has probably spent 20% of its time on this, and that doesn't even begin to touch on how much staff time has been spent just in dealing with the current issues, not even to mention
Those costs, if you check the record, Dana has a complete list of how those costs are recouped.
some of it's in the cost allocation system, some of it is not. A lot of costs that don't fall into that.
And I think we've seen,
And by the way, it's our responsibility to have oversight with respect to the nursing home, and I don't mind spending a few extra hours on that responsibility.
I'm not complaining about it, I'm simply saying it's disingenuous to say that it doesn't cost the taxpayers of this county any dollars. We do have substantial staff and human resource and other internal
And
resources.
that is all accounted for and recouped, and Dana gave us.
We've had that discussion before.
Oh, we can have it again, Gary, and the point is that it's not right to suggest that the taxpayers are paying for anything to do with the nursing home, because they are not.
Well, the flip side of that too is you can't just look where we are. You need to look at the trend line. And the trend line has been up and it has been down. And the question is not where we are, but where will we be?
Well, the cash balance at the nursing home has improved here in the past number of years, couple of
It's
years.
blipped up just as other years it has blipped down.
And we need to keep an eye on it. We're trying to do what we can to make sure we maintain the financial stability.
Absolutely. I just say it's not so clear cut. There are a lot of facts that have to be considered. This is far from a comprehensive review. And someday, this county's going to have to conduct that comprehensive review.
I got a couple on my desk that have been done in the last few years, 3 years. Strategic review was done.
These have been talked about in conceptual levels, right? They're in conceptual levels.
You're not going to agree with any of those or accept any of those comprehensive reviews, but I can tell you that there are copies in the office of comprehensive strategic reviews that have been done within the last, arguably,
Well,
6 years.
they're not comprehensive.
But they're not.
Because there's a number of options that have not been discussed here.
Right.
Some
Now,
of
what
which
would they be?
Some of PFM has talked about the idea of spinning off your aging office, possibly combining that in a nonprofit status. There are a number of things that were kicked around just conceptually here. And those things have not, we've never really talked
Have they been
about.
tasked, have they gone to the chief clerk for a task to produce?
That's what the idea of strategic review is. When
Well-
you say we're going to do a strategic review, the idea is you look out 10 years and you say, what is the direction of this? What are the various options? We looked at a few options here. These are very good. This is a very good study. In terms of what role a nonprofit could potentially play, you've laid out some options. That's great. I'm just saying this doesn't cover every single particular
And
option.
its intention was not
No,
To do that.
to do that.
Certainly not.
I mean, we had talked about the, the notion of the 501c3 as a solution on a number of different fronts, had been entertained or discussed at a general level. We were trying to get down to a little more level of detail about what exactly was involved, and actually run through the cost benefit of doing any of these things.
This, and it was said earlier, this far exceeds what was even expected. So this is not casting any fault on this. As you said, this provides us some of the information we need to make good decisions. So,
Well, I think, in terms of, hopefully making something constructive out of this conversation, I do think that, we probably could all support the creation of the 501 Section C3 to help provide for, additional support for Claremont in terms of like what Commissioner Cross said, like if they would like another van or they needed, some of those ancillary items that help to improve the quality of life for the people who live in Claremont that may not be, something that you want to take out of the Claremont's budget. Again, it's not a general fund Cumberland County expense right now. We're trying to keep it that way. But if there are, supportive items that could be, purchased through 501 Section C3, I think we ought to explore that. I don't have any problem considering that.
Well, the consensus of the board is to look into that and come back with more details about different ways that the 501c3 is a charitable channel for the facility, then we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to remember through all this debate and discussion is that we have an excellent nursing home in Cumberland County whose only bottom line is providing quality of care.
Anything else?
Thank you, everybody, for helping with we really put in a lot of work on this, so thank everybody for their contribution. Hopefully it was worth your time. Thank you.